Ray, let's start off with some basics. You're originally from Erie, Pennsylvania.
Right.
Let's try and track young Ray Stein from Erie, Pennsylvania to the SED Special Engineer Detachment in Oak Ridge, Tennessee. You went to college from Erie. Where did you go to school?
Penn State.
And what were you studying at Penn State?
I majored in chemistry.
Chemistry. All right. And prior to turning on the tape, you told me that you left in your third year. Was that?
Right.
Okay. Let's just have you talk about leaving college and then apparently drafted in the Army, right?
Okay, fine. In the fall of 1942, I made a decision I wanted to go into service, and after I was rejected from the Navy Air Corps for not having enough teeth, I decided to go home and work for a few months until the draft, which I knew was coming right along. So I did that. I went home and worked in a local war plant, lower manufacturing, and I went into service on February 17th, 1943, and went through the normal things down at Cumberland, Pennsylvania, that the draftees do as far as a reception center. Actually, I found a friend in the interviewing section. I had met it through my fraternity at school. His son had come to join our fraternity, and he said, "Hey, we drafted, come and see me." So naturally, when I got there, I was going to ask to see him. He was a captain, and I didn't want any special favors, but he spotted me, and he said, "What do you want to do?" And I said, "I'd like to. What's your favorite? What's your hobby?" "Photography." He said, "Well, you don't want to do that in the service." I said, "Well, I studied chemistry." He said, "Well, chemical warfare." "All right, fine." Well, he said, "I'm going to send you to Shepherd Field first, being part of the Air Corps. Why, they'll give you 2 stripes after basic, and you get to, they'll keep you out of KP." So I went for that. So I went out, finished all my basic training. All the while I'd heard about ASTP, which is a program the Army had for letting you go back and finish college. It sounded like a good deal to me, so I kept applying, but I went through my basic training. Finally, in Camp Seibert, which is a chemical warfare basic training also, which I went to Shepherd Field to Camp Seibert.
Shepherd Field being in Texas. Sometimes I will interject just to make sure it's on the tape.
Right.
And Camp Seibert is
Alabama.
In Alabama. Okay.
Right. So while I was in Alabama, they screened the whole camp. Actually, what they were trying to do, I found out later, was keep the colleges open. They didn't want the colleges shut down for lack of students. So they went through that and had a program called Army Specialized Training Program, which was just going back to college. So that I'd been trying to get in, that was fine. So I went into that and had about 3 semesters of chemical engineering involved there. And then this is about the period of the Battle of the Bulge. And they needed manpower, soldier power in Europe, so they had to shut down the college program. But before they did that, I happened to be at the University of Pennsylvania in the program, and
just keep talking about it.
Okay. Good. And I was just before they sent the students out. We were all in the Army. They interviewed 100 of us one Saturday morning, which didn't tell us what it was all about. But when it came time to actually leave, they took 50 of that 100, which I found out after was fortunate enough to be one of the 50, and they sent us to Oak Ridge, and the rest went overseas, unfortunately. So this was, of course, a mystery. The sergeant who was in charge of us said, "You guys are getting a good deal." Of course, that intrigued, made us real apprehensive what we were going to get into. And so we went on, sent us to Knoxville, Tennessee, actually. And Oak Ridge turned out to be a pooling place for the Manhattan Project, which we knew nothing of at the time. We didn't know what the Manhattan Project meant. And they were using these soldiers with technical training as assistants or whatever they needed in the various installations. Oak Ridge, Y12, K25, and X10, I believe, were the ones at Oak Ridge, but there's also installations at Washington State, Los Alamos, and there was someplace, Chicago and New York. Manhattan, of course, started in New York. So we were being screened there and interviewed, and some of them put right to work there, and some were shipped out to other installations. Then, all of a sudden, after about their second or third day, a captain, or it might have been a major, I'm not sure, picked us up in an Army car and took us back to Knoxville. Well, we said, we thought there was 3 or 4 of us in the cab, or in his car, in the Army car, and we thought we were going to go to the train station and be shipped out, which was normal procedure if you work at Oak Ridge. But we went in Knoxville and went right by the train station and went to the Farragut Hotel. Oh boy, we were really wondering what's going on. First thing, I think it was the lieutenant that took us up there. Said, first thing he sat down, he said, I want you to send home for your civilian clothes. Well, first thing my father did when he got that request was come down and see what's going on. Anyways, I think he waited a little while. But anyways, we did this, and we were still didn't know what was going on. So finally, time came for them to, after we got our civilian clothes, to tell us what we were to do. So they said there's a plant, a war plant, I think it was about 30 miles, which was over from Knoxville, and they want us to go out there and go to the personnel office and apply for a job. And we had a little resume and had the local job departure form. I remember mine was Fulton Sifflin in Knoxville, Tennessee. But the first day we went out, and they sent us out in pairs. They rejected us. The guards wouldn't let us in. We hadn't been properly notified. So we went back, called our lieutenant. He said, well, try again tomorrow. So he greased the way for tomorrow. So we went in. And of course, personnel, there were certain people that knew who we were, and they sent us in to do a job. And we were sent to Y12 and given the job of, the job title was filter foreman. And as we found out later, much later, they weren't telling us, they didn't tell us a thing what was going on. But somewhere along the line, someone told us what books to go to, so we went to the bookstore and found Strategies of Modern Physics. So we pretty much found out that Lawrence was the father of Y12, the process there.
Can you, for the purposes of the tape, define what Y12 was? What that encompassed?
It was one of the 3 processes that that the Manhattan Project had decided to use, which was, as I said, was Father Lawrence out in California, for separation of. The whole purpose was separation of U-235 and U-238.
Okay.
And it was just that difference in atomic weights with these isotopes that made it possible to do this electromagnetic process.
Okay.
The other processes were also, but they weren't as efficient as ours was at Y12, electromagnetic. And so, but in running this process, you tell me if I miss anything else. In running this process, you had to have a magnet, and there wasn't enough copper left in the United States to use it for everything else, so they went to Fort Knox and got silver to use in the magnet. They borrowed it, and that's one thing that the head of this unit in Oak Ridge, General Leslie Groves, very meticulous about accounting for all this silver that they had taken. He was going to make sure they got it all back again.
Now, to go back, when you first got there to Knoxville, and you were being processed and so on, did you have any idea, number one, of what the whole program was there?
No, we did not. They didn't tell us anything. It was on a need-to-know basis.
Okay.
I tell you.
Right. Was there any common knowledge in the public? I mean, you were on the periphery of the scientific community and so on. Was there any common knowledge that there was such thing as atomic energy or that it was being experimented with?
No.
When in this process did you find out what you were working on?
Well, as I mentioned, when we were in Knoxville waiting for our clothes to come, someone, I can't recall just when or who did it, told us what books to go to.
Right.
There's Particles of Modern Physics. And it explained Lawrence's process for electromagnetic separating the isotopes.
Okay.
So that's where we we talked among ourselves, don't get me wrong.
Oh, sure. Sure. I mean,
we shared knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
And we just finally pieced it together, but no one, in fact, the fellow that took us in, one of the officers asked us if we knew that. And somebody, I don't remember who said it, might have been me, I don't know. From ancient times, the alchemists, kings wanted to convert lead to gold.
Sure.
There was a conversion there. And that was and he shut up. He didn't say any more. Because we were getting a little bit, along the right line. So anyways. But we just, among ourselves, and after working in the plant, we could see how it all fit together. And after reading the book I had,
Now,
figured it out.
While you were there, basically, my hearing of what you said is that you went in as undercover military people. You were being treated as being civilian employees of this company.
Exactly.
What was the name of the company?
It was run by Eastman Kodak.
Oh, really?
They call it Tennessee Eastman.
Oh,
In fact,
okay.
we got our paycheck from them. We were, as far as anyone knew, we were employees of Tennessee Eastman. And we even went so far as to, every once a month, we had to turn our paychecks back into the Army. They give us credit for what our Army paid. We did have a little allowance for clothing. They gave us an allowance.
Okay. Now, where did you live during this time?
Well, Oak Ridge started from scratch. 59,000 acres. General Groves acquired from a government. They helped them acquire it, and there were people living there, but they had to move them all out. And it was an ideal place because of the TVA authority, the dams that were there. And they had plenty of electricity.
Yes, they did.
And they needed it especially for this electromagnetic process. So there's a town site built. They had to go from police force, the grocery stores, the whole bit. But when then they built dormitories. Stone and Webster was the contractor that built all the dormitories and much of the plant.
So you lived in a dormitory as part of that complex?
Right. We lived right with the people that worked there. Alice my wife lived in a girls' dormitory, and she became, I can mention later on, a little bit of what she did, or she can tell you.
Okay.
But
we'll get to there at some point. So how long were you in the Army between the time you were drafted and the time you became an Eastman employee, so to speak?
I say basic training and all, at least 9 months.
Okay.
About 9 months.
Okay. And how long did you work for Eastman Kodak?
Well, about 2 years.
About 2 years. All right. And it became obvious to you what the process was because you have a scientific background,
right.
and you observe certain things and you talk with your friends and you piece together some things. Did you have a knowledge of where this whole thing was going?
No.
When the first bomb was dropped, well, did you know about atomic energy before the bomb was dropped? I mean, had your knowledge progressed to that point where you knew, or because I've been told that some of the people didn't know anything about it until the bomb was dropped and said, "Oh my God, that's what I've been working on."
Like I said before, it was on a need-to-know basis. Even the people working there didn't know the whole story, but they could piece together from what they knew. But it took our plant maybe make only grams a day of 235, but they hadn't really made a live experiment It wasn't until August 16th, I think, 1945, out in Los Alamos, that they actually had a bomb and dropped.
Right. Right. I was going to ask you about that. Were you aware that that had happened?
Afterwards, yeah. Like everyone else knew it. We didn't know what it was, because it happened so fast. After that, they used it that it wasn't time for too much information.
But how did you find out that experiment had been conducted? Was that in the internally through the government channels, or just because it was in the news?
Whatever was in the news.
Okay.
We learned nothing from the government channels.
Okay. And did you connect what you were doing with, when you picked up the morning paper and said, oh, they did this, did you say, wait a minute, this connects to what I've been doing?
Oh, yeah. We knew right away what it was.
Right away, okay. All right.
We were related then.
Mm-hmm. And how long after the bombs were dropped were you still working there and working on this project?
0. The minute they dropped the bomb, they shut the plant down. It was too expensive to operate. We went back in uniform the next day, as I remember. It might have been several days, but it was very fast. They just shut it down because it was too expensive to operate, and essentially the war. It might have been the arm after the September 2nd. I'm not sure now. I can't remember that. But it was very soon.
Very, very quickly.
Yeah, it's too expensive. They all went down. The others were more expensive to operate than our process. We had the most efficient process.
Wow.
Would you like to include a little bit of what this process did? I was telling you about the magnet they had.
Yeah, let me get back to that in a minute. I'd like to tie up your service time.
Okay.
So once they closed down your pseudo job, let's say, with Tennessee Eastman,
right,
you went back into uniform, and then what happened to you?
Well, they had us little jobs. There were some areas needed cleaning up. We worked in the plant our 8 hours a day, just continued, and we were doing some cleanup work, trying to collect any miscellaneous material that was loose in the plant. But as soon as we acquired points or whatever needed to get out, discharges, they discharged us.
Oh, okay. So you were discharged from Oak Ridge?
Right. Well, they sent me back.
Returned to civilian life.
Right.
Well, let's talk about process, and then we'll get back to Ray's life. Tell us about the process.
Well, the interesting process, as I told you, we needed this tremendous amount of like copper-like material, and silver was the closest to as far as conduction, to make this tremendous magnet, because they needed they called it a racetrack. It was a large area, and they had this magnet all the way around it. And what we were doing then, as I said, separating those two isotopes, and I had a drawing, I won't bother to get out, but what they were doing is putting it in this magnetic field, and the heavier isotope would fall one place in the semicircle, and the lighter one would fall closer in, so then they could collect it in a collection unit on the other side. And that's what Alice was doing. They had what they call calutrons that Lawrence had invented, and they had to put a charge of uranium, I think it was the fluoride form at that time, and it would run out. Well, these girls didn't know what they were doing, but they knew what knobs to turn and what readings they need, and that's what Alice was a forelady. And if the girls had trouble, while she was there to help them get out of it, she was actually sent to the University of Tennessee for training. Okay. These were all young girls that were.
Were they local girls? Were there local employees in your section as well?
Yes. Oh, yes, very much. They were local. Okay. They were just trained to do this one job. The same way there was a tremendous vacuum system. They were all local people and just trained to do one job.
Were there any restrictions on travel for the people at Oak Ridge? Because, when you talk to people that were at Los Alamos, that was a closed city.
Right.
Okay. Was there anything like that with you folks at Oak Ridge?
Yes, it was very closely guarded. I don't know of any tight travel restrictions. They were just continually warned.
They were searched all the time.
Searched all the time and told not to talk.
But for instance, you said that your father came down to check out what was going on. he could come to
He came to Oak Ridge.
Oak Ridge and come into town in the normal manner that
Well, I
a
won't say
person
it's
would.
normal. They searched him
Okay.
for guns or weapons
There's
or
a
whatever.
reason to come in.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
They had a reason to come in.
Okay.
But he was able to, they had guest houses for people that wanted to stay there.
Okay.
But he didn't stay very long after he found out that I was not AWOL.
You know, when you said that he was worried about it, I never thought of that aspect. that yeah, asking for your civilian clothes.
Yeah, it looked kind of fishy to him.
Yeah. Yeah, that's
But
funny.
they even went so far as to fix us up with 4F cards. They went all the way. He
Mm.
said that was the worst job, the Army said the worst job they had was trying to get the post office to stamp those cards saying we were 4F. Little things like that they remembered.
That's funny.
We
That's
just
funny.
lived like normal. We did our 8 hours, a 24-hour operation. We did our normal life and just carried on. And I met Alice, my wife, there. And
So while people lived in dorms, were there people who had homes or apartments? You know, like married people and so on and so forth.
Mhm.
Now, did you two marry there? Or
no,
you just met there and
met there. She didn't want to have a war marriage, so we waited after war was over. But we had decided
Probably
by
a
then.
fairly wise decision.
Yeah.
Although you didn't end up going overseas at any time. The way things go in the military, it could have happened just as well as not.
It could have, but in the Manhattan Project, I think they were closer tabs on people that left the project. I think they watched them pretty close.
Oh,
I doubt
sure.
if we would have gotten very far.
Well, no, I mean, the military taking people and sending them hither and yon. I can
Yeah.
understand why she was not anxious to marry before this whole thing was over.
Well, it was interesting because, it's a joke in the Army. They don't put the round pegs in the square holes, this sort of thing. I have a fellow I exercise with. He was a scientist, worked for CDC. How come I didn't get in that project? He was qualified. It's just the luck of the draw.
Of course. With the numbers of people that they were dealing with, at least they found a guy who had some scientific background.
Right.
Let's talk about some of the circumstances of life there, the searching and so on and so forth. Did you ever feel like you were being watched or being observed, kind of testing your loyalty?
Well, I wouldn't go that far, but, for an example, if you were a suspicious character, if you were at a bus station waiting for a bus by yourself, you'd be suspicious. But if you were with a girl, chances are you're just out on a date, and that wouldn't be as suspicious looking. Because I think I recall some cases where as soon as that guy...
See, Alice, you made him unsuspicious just by going out on a date with him.
There were some instances where a fellow might have put his girl on the bus and he was immediately picked up or interrogated, but Alice had some cases where she had a camera and they took her camera and exposed the film. They just want to make sure it was
Yeah.
not used for any purposes.
Did your training in the service and your experience in the service continue into your life after the service?
Well, as far as working with people, yes. It was the first job I ever had was training people that I had under me and telling them what to do and actually getting along with them. You had to handle all their, insurance things, all the normal things you do for employees.
Yeah.
So it was my first real training. Yes, it helped me an awful lot, I thought, just in learning to deal with people.
Did you continue in a scientific field after you left the Army?
Well, yes, I worked in the paper industry. I was a salesman, chemical salesman.
Oh, okay.
But it gave me a lot of confidence in what I could do.
Sure.
But these people we brought in for the countryside they didn't care what was going on. It was a job to them. They didn't care. It didn't bother them. But
Now, you had to know, regardless of how much it looked like a job, the fact that you were being paid by the Army and they'd gone through all of this stuff to get you acting like a civilian. I got to ask the question: when did you find out that he was really a soldier?
After we've been dating a while,
Okay.
not right away. He didn't tell me right now.
That's a good question. That's come up several times. I don't know what the actual timing was. But there was a time when we realized that what was the future held for us, and she would go to some meetings that she didn't really know what they were talking about. She didn't really know what they were doing.
Mm-hmm.
But I would question her to try to learn more. But we were gotten to know each other well enough then that we had mutual trust.
Mm-hmm. Were you in the same area of this plant?
Same big building.
Okay.
He was in the basement.
Uh-huh. Well, obviously then he was a social climber trying to meet somebody who worked up above him.
Right. Obviously. One of the things that I was concerned about was the girls thought that she was dating a 4F. They kind of looked at her kind of funny, but she was so happy when the war ended, and I was able to come out and go up there in uniform. That made her day.
The things that people went through, there's so many of those. As I told you earlier, the interviews, every veterans interview that I've done with this project has had one of those little twist kind of elements.
Yeah.
You know, and this is probably the best one of all. Let me see here. You were working 8 hours a day. At some point you had a girlfriend. What was recreation like in Oak Ridge? What was there recreation? Were there things to do?
That's interesting. Do you say that? Because recently we met, I belonged to a World War II group in Atlanta, and we found a lady that had the same job that Alice did. And she had a big time playing sports and basketball. Alice said, I don't know when you had found time to do all that. Because Alice said she
You
didn't.
had to change shifts every week.
Oh.
And that interferes with your sleeping, your eating,
Your social life.
everything.
Oh, certainly.
Every week we had to change shifts. I didn't do much. They had in the town site, they had a building, and if you wanted to, Saturday night, if you weren't working or sleeping, you could go over there and dance to a jukebox. Sunday morning, if you weren't working or sleeping, you could go over there to church. They moved the jukebox over and put up some chairs.
Yep.
So there, and then if you have a day off, you could get on the bus and go into Knoxville. You didn't have much money, but you could go in, you could walk in a park or do something. So all I did was work.
Well, now, I'm going to question you on that, ma'am. We already know that you started dating.
This other girl that had the same job that I did, she said she played ball, she was on a ball team. I never even saw a baseball game. The whole time I was there.
Bob, the whole atmosphere at Oak Ridge was just so electrifying. Everybody was just, the war effort was it.
Yes.
The war effort, everything was for the war effort.
You have to ride a bus from the town site to Y-12. You couldn't drive or walk, you don't even know where it is. It's back in the mountains someplace. So the other sections are back in the mountains.
Oh, I'm glad you brought that up because I was not aware of that. I had the concept in my mind when you mentioned that this 59,000 acres, I figured that it was right there and you could see it.
Just a few acres right here.
They were scattered all over this area, the different plants.
What I wanted to say that people, I'm not the only one where everybody worked. Nobody was late to work. You couldn't be late if you didn't get the bus, you weren't there, but nobody quit. Nobody ever quit their job. I never knew anybody to leave early.
Never thought about it.
You couldn't leave because where you can't walk through the mountains. You were driven way back there. Everybody worked.
Huh.
And everybody put in 8 hours. There wasn't any goofing off.
Let me ask you a question that I asked your husband. How much did you have an idea of what you were working on?
Absolutely nothing. I knew nothing.
How much did you have a sense of the secrecy and the security?
I I was told do not talk while you're on the job, do not talk when you're away. I went to meetings where big people were working because I was the foreman. I knew how to read the meters and the dials and plot the graphs and what to do and take care of the girls. I'd go to these meetings about every 2 or 3 weeks. When you leave here, you do not talk. I didn't know what they were talking about to begin with. I sure couldn't squeal on it.
I tried to question her. I didn't get anything from her at all.
I go to meetings, you sit there, you don't say anything, you listen, then you leave, you don't talk. I didn't talk. And I sure could read the meters and the dials and put the work out.
She knew, she was very conscientious.
And
Well, let me ask you the same question I asked your husband about when you knew about the A-bomb experiment in the desert.
when they dropped the bomb and it
Yeah.
came out on the news.
Did you connect? Did you make an instant connection of, oh wow, now I know what I've been doing?
I'm not sure I did. I think probably somebody had to tell me. Probably Ray had to tell me. But I really did have a bad time with when I'd be walking up and down the aisle and like people would say draft dodger, under their breath or something. Because their boyfriends and husbands and fathers were all in the service.
Sure.
And Ray went, how come your boyfriend's not in the service? And he told me he had a bad knee. Well, it looks okay to me, walks all right. I said, well, I can't help that.
Yeah.
So they thought Ray was the draft dodger, I imagine. And then when they dropped that bomb and he came up in his uniform, they just about saluted me. They were sorry they'd said all.
What was your rank?
Sergeant,
Sergeant.
buck sergeant.
Okay.
They only gave us that to give us a little more pay. We weren't very high in the totem pole.
No, but it meant that you hadn't just enlisted, that you had been in the service for a period of time to have the 3 stripes. I mean,
Right.
And that does make a difference.
Oh, yeah.
People
Sure does.
people react to that. People react to stripes and collar insignias and so on and so forth.
But it was such a wonderful time as far as the atmosphere, the work ethic.
Mhm.
Oh, it was just, you'd ask what we did we were in groups of 2. We each had a room. There was about 12 or 14 of us. But we would go in town, go bowling. They didn't seem to tail us to it. But there was always a feeling of wherever you talked to might be FBI, CIC, CIA. They didn't know you. So everybody didn't talk.
Yeah.
You didn't do it.
With the materials that you were working with, have you ever had any health problems connected to them?
That's interesting you mentioned that, because where we live for 40 years now, there are high tension wires behind us. And for a long time, there were articles in the paper and the magazines that they might affect you.
Mm-hmm.
Well, am I saying it wrong? No, but we never have experienced any health
Okay.
problems. Never.
Anything else you want to tell me about your time in Oak Ridge and the program before we close? Because I think we've kind of wrapped it up.
I think so. I think we have.
Any other impressions?
After it was all over, I met one of the girls that I had met when we went in together, and I didn't see much of her. She had another job, and she said, that job we had, you had to be a college graduate. And I said, well, they knew I wasn't a college graduate, but to have my job, you had to be one. I said, I had only been to business college, high school, and the business college. So one man said, well, I think you used good grammar. So they needed somebody. I think your grammar was okay.
Oh, that's interesting.
Communication.
That's why I think I was foreman. But I did not know anything about it. It didn't bother me that I didn't know.
No,
I knew it was
because
a war plant, and I knew it was something special.
yeah, and that era, that was enough.
That's all I need to know.
Yeah. Folks, thank you very much. This has been a real pleasure doing this interview. This will conclude the interview, and thank you very much.